Collateral consequences of representation in civil trials and bail prices. When money buys justice, for those who can afford it, by Olivia Indelicato and Renou. One of the most damaging collateral consequences of involvement in the justice system with relation to poverty is the limitation of Gideon versus Wainwright and the resulting lack of legal representation for indigent people. Prior to 1963, the Sixth Amendment, which provides individuals with the right to an attorney in criminal cases, only applied to federal courts. In a 9-0 decision, it was decided that the Sixth Amendment should apply to state courts as well, meaning that defendants are entitled to an attorney in all criminal trials. However, it's important to note that Gideon versus Wainwright does not apply to civil cases, and as a result, defendants are not entitled to an attorney in such cases. In civil cases, due to the fact that poor people are not entitled to an attorney, there now exists a justice gap between low and high income people seeking legal assistance. The justice gap is defined by the Legal Services Corporation as a crisis of access for low income people to get legal representation. The LSC reports that 71% of all low-income people have been involved in a civil legal problem within the last year, and these statistics become even higher for certain groups within this population. The statistics raise to 71% of veterans, 80% of disabled people, 80% of people with children, and 97% of survivors of sexual assault. Based on the aforementioned statistics, it's clear that there is an immense need for legal assistance. However, only 20% of low-income people seek legal assistance, and an astounding 14% of these people actually receive the legal assistance that they need. This is due to the fact that there's an extremely low cutoff for Americans to qualify for legal aid. An individual has to make less than $14,713 per year, meaning that for an income of a family of 4, the income must be below $30,313. In order to bridge the current justice gap, it's clear that there must be an increase in the legal assistance offered to indigent people involved in civil cases, because the current legal assistance offered is not sufficient for the huge number of people in need for such assistance. A possible solution which would increase the legal assistance offered to indigent people would be to extend the decision reached in Gideon versus Wainwright to apply to civil cases, meaning that people involved in civil cases would be entitled to an attorney, and therefore would not have to represent themselves in such cases. Now, it is our proposal to require all attorneys to represent indigent people in civil cases, and to donate a certain number of hours per year to such a cause. Now, in order to ensure that this is just and moral, we can apply Nozick's transfer of holdings, which states that holdings of a person are just if he is entitled to them by the principles of justice in acquisition and transfer, or by the principle of rectification of justice. Winning a case would mean that the justice is rectified. Therefore, since the transfer of holdings, in this case legal help, is transferred for the purpose of rectification of justice, then the transfer of such a holding from attorneys to indigent people in and of itself is just. Also, according to Sen, there's a moral obligation to help those less fortunate than you, if the negative impact on you is less than the negative impact on the person in need. As a result, attorneys should be required to provide legal assistance to those who cannot otherwise afford it. Another method of ensuring that the legal system is fair for indigent people who cannot afford an attorney would be to simplify the legal system so that it's easier for people to represent themselves. Currently, researchers have identified almost 200 discrete tasks that self-represented litigants must perform in civil cases. But many of these require special legal knowledge that the average person simply doesn't have access to. As a result, this lack of legal knowledge results in ineffective representation, and people are unable to get the results that they deserve. Now, we decided that this should be applied to simple legal disputes, such as uncontested divorce cases. But in order to take care of complicated civil matters, we should resort to an expansion of Gideon versus Wainwright and the expansion of the legal assistance that's provided to people who are in poverty and cannot afford an attorney. A second issue exists within the American judicial system that has immense effects on those who are impoverished. In the United States, the majority of people who are currently incarcerated are awaiting for their trial to begin, and thus are perceived as innocent by the United States criminal justice system. Currently, there are 646,000 people incarcerated in the United States, but 70% of these people are actually awaiting trial and have not yet been convicted. As a result, this number does not reflect an increase in the safety of American society, because a majority of these people are innocent, are first-time offenders, or were perpetrators of non-violent crimes. Now, you may be wondering why these people are incarcerated. This demonstrates the result of the effects of poverty on the ability to post bail. These 70% of people were unable to post bail and as a result are incarcerated. However, it does not reflect their innocence or guilt or make the streets any safer within the United States. In order to evaluate how the presence of bail is unjust in our society today, we must take into consideration Rawls' theory of justice, which revolves around equal opportunity for all, regardless of the circumstances of one's birth. As a result, the bail system is a violation of this theory, due to the fact that only those who are poor are incarcerated, and people of a higher socioeconomic status who can post bail are allowed to return home while awaiting trial, and do not have to wait in jail. Now, the people who are placed in jail are already behind economically, and therefore are put at a greater disadvantage after time in jail. This is due to the fact that one cannot work or care for family while in jail, and jail time leads to societal isolation and mental or physical trauma from incarceration. We determined that there were multiple solutions in order to make the process of bail more fair for people who are in poverty. The first of which would be to increase the number of public defenders through increased funding. A study done by the Prison Policy Initiative shows that a lack of representation leads to higher bail when people represent themselves. As a result, higher bail leads to higher incarceration rates who those cannot pay. If people had public defenders, then they would be less likely to have such high bail prices and would not end up being incarcerated as a result of their inability to pay. The funding for such a program could come from the decrease in spending on jails that this would cause. Another solution would be the use of unsecured bonds. Instead of the money being paid up front, a predetermined amount would be charged to the defendant if they do not appear in court. Therefore, this would give people an incentive to show up to court. However, they would not be required to give this money before awaiting trial, and therefore could spend their time at home, working, caring for their family, and making more money in order to support their families. Another solution to the high price of bail would be the reallocation of funds to focus on rehabilitation rather than incarceration. It's been shown that factors such as poverty, drug addiction, and homelessness drive crime. However, if we focus on rehabilitating these people rather than incarcerating them, then it's less likely that people will have a repeat offense. Additionally, in order to set bail, judges should evaluate a defendant's ability to pay before setting bail arbitrarily. Bail should be set proportionate to a person's income, so a person with a higher income should have to pay a higher bail, while a person with a lower income should have to pay a lower bail, that makes more sense for their income. As a result, these people would not have to be incarcerated while awaiting trial and could return to their homes. In conclusion, it's clear that the current judicial system marginalizes indigent people. The current system must be reformed in order to actually promote justice, which is the purpose of the American judicial system. This should be done through allowing indigent people representation in civil proceedings and in bail hearings, and through the reinvention of the process of setting bail prices to reflect a person's ability to pay, rather than being arbitrarily done. If we take these into consideration, we can ensure that the justice system provides justice.